Chapter 19. This chapter is about legal descriptions and deeds. And in this chapter, we're going to discuss three methods of describing real property. We're going to learn those three different types of legal descriptions of land. We're going to identify the four different types of deeds that are used in New Jersey. We learned that deeds are the documents that are used to transfer title, meaning ownership. However, there are four different types of them. We're going to learn about those. And then we're going to go over the anatomy of a deed and learn about its parts, what needs to be in a deed. All right, so legal descriptions are an exact way of describing real property in a contract, deed, mortgage, or other document that's acceptable in a court of law. A legal description can be combined or altered only by a competent authority like a surveyor or a title attorney. A deed is a document that conveys one's right, title, or interest in real property, the partial ownership interest, perhaps. So your rights, like air rights or mineral rights, title, ownership, or interest, partial ownership interest may be in a property. So there must be an adequate description of the land being conveyed so that we know exactly what is being transferred here. And there are three legal descriptions of land. They are the metes and bounds system, the rectangular system, which also goes as the name as the rectangular government survey system, or PLSS, that's the public land survey system. We probably won't get this one though. That's used amongst the professionals in the industry of surveying. But for these two, we may get them on exam, the rectangular and government survey. And then lastly, the plat. A plat is a map of a subdivision. We learned about that in the last chapter. So it's recorded in the county where the land is located. So let's highlight on page 353 that legal descriptions are exact ways of describing what exactly is being transferred here. And so let's make those highlights now. Let me know when you got them. Is that enough time? Did everybody get them? The highlights? Okay, so you guys got that. All right, so legal descriptions should always include the name of the county and the state in which the land is located. In New Jersey, we have several municipalities that also share the same names too. So you always got to specify the name of the county that it's in. Because you could have more than one municipality with the same name, so we have to also specify the county. Now, benchmarks are local permanent markers that aid surveyors in their measurements, which could be based on those markers, those benchmarks, rather than the actual benchmark, which could be miles away. Datum is a measurement of elevation. It's a point, line, or surface from which elevation is measured. According to the United States Geological Survey, they define zero elevation as the mean sea level at New York Harbor. Monuments are markers at the corners of the property to mark the boundaries, often with a wood, steel piece of rebar, or if there's a tree there, they could have a ribbon that's attached pinned to the tree or to a piece of wood sticking out of the ground. So that's what a benchmark datum, and a monument is. I'm going over these in a little bit of a different order because you're not seeing them right here in the book just yet. Maybe monuments underneath the meets and bounds section. But it's important to know what these ones are before we get into those other legal descriptions. So when we get to it in the book, we'll do the highlight on it. So these are pictures of surveyor benchmarks. It could be attached to a pole sticking out of the ground, looking like a sign, or usually you see them like this, embedded in a rock. You could be hiking out in a wilderness and come across one of these things embedded into a rock. They're glued into rocks. You know, rocks, the the concrete sidewalk or the street or what have you. You could find these all over. You may stumble across them. Okay. Here's one that was put there in 1933. Shows you the elevation. It was placed there by the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey. It shows you how many feet above sea level you are at this point. Here's one from 1947. Here's one that's being replaced that was put there in 1882. They're replacing it in 2016? Sometimes they need to be replaced. They get all rotted out and stuff when they get old enough. You can find these around from the 1800s. Surveyors have been going across the country surveying the land and putting down these markers and taking notes where they are. Here's some more examples of surveyor benchmarks. Here's one that shows the elevation as of this exact point embedded in a brick in a building. Here's one placed in 1890 in a stone. And this one looks like it's near a dam. Here you got a surveyor mark. That is. See, they go by several different looks on them too. So here's a team of surveyors. Looks like from back in the 1800s. Here is their toolkit. Even though they got that tripod there, there was a time before. See, this is probably in the 1800s where they got the looking glass that they could look through. 1700s, they may not have had that yet. And then there's it's always at least a two-man team where they could, have this pole where they do a lineup and measure the elevation looking through that scope. But before they had some of that equipment, this is all that they used as well, was a compass, a chain, a surveyor's chain, and I'm not exactly sure what that part is right there. But either way, the surveyors have been crossing our country, exploring and surveying the land since before we have become a country. You got the explorers, right? And then surveyors. So here's some of the measurements that they use. There are 43,560 square feet in an acre, which we've learned that, right? A township, we're not talking about the name of a municipality. A township, when we talk about surveys and we use the word township, it's a unit of measure. It's 36 square miles. Or another way of saying that is 6 miles squared. So 36 square miles or 6 miles squared. Section is 1 square mile, which contains 640 acres in it. So there are 36 sections in a township. A chain is either 33 feet in length or 66 feet in length. That's the surveyor's chain here. It is, yes, an actual chain with handles at both ends, and they stretch it out to make sure that they to take their measurements. It's kind of like an old-fashioned tape ruler, and basically like an old-fashioned measuring tape. And basically, the two-man team, one would grab one end, one would grab the other. They would stretch it out. They would also have something like this on a pole that's of a specific height, and they would take the measurements of degrees and degrees of which direction that they were measuring in. If it wasn't a straight north line, they have to take the degrees, and then they draw their maps and take all their measurements, like this fella here in the center seems to be doing right there in that picture. Okay. Here's some more measurements that they use. Square miles, 640 acres. You have a hectare. A hectare, we don't really use that as much here in the United States as they do in other countries, but a hectare is 100 meters by 100 meters. It's actually 2.47 acres. So we have the metes and bounds legal description of land for the first legal description of land that we'll go through. So it's a measurement of distance and direction around the property's boundaries. Metes, like meters, and bounds, the boundaries. So it's a measurement of distance and direction around the property's boundary line. It is only used in the 13 original states, of which New Jersey is one of them. Now, the surveyor will begin their measurement at one of the corners of the property. They refer to this as the point of beginning, or the POB for short. It's a designated point at which the surveyor begins and ends their measurement. And so they start their measurement and they work their way all the way around the property doing the measurements until they return to that same point and close the loop. Now, it doesn't really matter if they start going clockwise or counterclockwise, as long as the surveyor makes the notation on their survey which direction they're going in. So it's a measurement of distance and direction around the property's boundary lines. That measurement starts and ends at the point of beginning. Monuments are used to establish real estate boundaries. So the surveyor can have a piece of wood or a piece of steel rebar that they'll pound in the ground at each of the corners of the property. If it's a square or rectangular lot, there'll be 4 of them. But you could have lots that are irregular shaped and have more corners and angles than just 4. Either way, we as real estate agents should tell our buyers that we're working with that the attorney's probably going to order a title search and survey for them. Ask them who the survey company is so that you could find out how much they charge for putting the stakes in the ground at each of the corners of the property, because it can vary greatly from one to another. I've seen it as cheap as $75 and as much as $475 per stake that they put in the ground. So you could shop around for surveyors based on how much they charge for that. They may charge not as much for the survey, but then they kill you on putting the stakes in the ground. It's one thing for them to give you a map of your property. It's another thing to know actually where the edge of your property is, so you know where to put a fence in the ground, to know where your property line is. So it's very important for homeowners, especially if they're going to be doing any construction, putting up sheds or fences on their property boundary, to know where that actual boundary is, right? So that's what this tip is about here. So let's highlight metes and bounds and what a monument is. On page 354, and let me know when you got it, please. I'll also be showing you guys the example of surveyor's write-up.
I got it.
All right. So here's a survey of actually my property. I got a bend in the street. There's a bend in the road by my property. The road bends. So you could see that there's an arch here. So the surveyor also has to measure the distance of the arch, what the radius is, and I guess the diameter, maybe that's what that is. I'm not sure. But here you can see there's a POB. This is where their surveyor begins their measurement, and then they work their way measuring around the property's boundaries, taking notation of different things that are there, pavers and wood shed and a concrete pad and a wooden deck, the basement door. We got a driveway, although he put asphalt and it's a concrete driveway. He screwed that part up. Um, and the walkways and such like that. Now, you can see there's also a fence over here. This fence is actually in on my property inside the boundary. Why? Because there's some trees right over here. So the fence was inside the property a little bit. Instead of cutting down all them trees, the fence went inside my property a bit. Now over here, there's a neighbor's fence, and they put it inside my property by about 1.5 feet onto my property line from here to here. So they were putting up a new fence. I told them to do their survey and make sure they put the fence actually on their property line and not inside the property line of my property. But there you get an idea. They do a measurement of the distance, the direction. Look, we even have degrees of latitude and longitude. It's north 55 degrees. What is that? 3,000 east. What is that? Can't read it that well. Anyway, you can see their measurements. Yeah. So it's like this one here. I know what they're doing. So 78.74 feet in the back here. South 16 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. That's what that is, east. Okay, so that's how they're taking those measurements. All right, so here it is an example of a survey, once again, for my property. And this is the way it was written up. Example A, legal description. Now it's not, you could see the survey map, but it's accompanied by a write-up. And this write-up can be on its own or it can be part of the deed. It can be written into the deed like this. Now, what is this? All that tract or parcel, and they use weird wording. All that tract and parcel of land and premises situated lying under being the city of Linden, Union County, in the state of New Jersey, which is known as designated Lot 8, Block 199-106. That's not my lot and block number. So basically what they're doing is they're explaining a map of a proposed subdivision. So my entire section of town was bought by a developer, and it was known at that time as Lot 8, Block 199-106. It actually used to be a golf course over here. On a map entitled The Map of Sunnyfield Incorporated, Section 1, Linden, Union County, New Jersey, made by David Ross, Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors, September 1949, and filed in the office of the Registered Union County on January 13th, 1950 as map number 335B. Okay, so they're showing you this is part of a subdivision that they're doing. So you see a little bit more of a history in this than you do in your typical survey, because this is showing you that the entire section of town over here was once bought by somebody, and then they divided it up into smaller parcels, and this was a subdivision. So now it's basically your town, your municipality is made up of many different subdivisions built by developers, and mine is no different, but this, you actually see the write-up of that original subdivision and how they now start surveying down to my individual property in there. So they show you beginning at a point on the south, this is first how they identify where the point of beginning is, where they're going to start the measurement of my property. Beginning at the point of the southwesterly sideline of Sunnyfield Drive, which point is distant 312.06 feet along the various courses and distances of the southwesterly sideline of Sunnyfield Drive from its intersection with the southwesterly sideline of Princeton Road. I guess another surveyor could understand that and make heads or tails of it, but our heads are probably spinning just reading that, saying, what the hell did he just read? So if both streets were produced to form an intersection and are running. All right. Thence, along that said southwesterly sideline of Sunnyfield Drive in general southeasterly section, on a curve to the left, having a radius of 325 feet and an arch of 56.72 feet to the point, thence, okay, so this is the way that they could read. This is the way that a survey would read. If you just get this description from a surveyor, are you going to be able to find where your edge of your property line is so that you could put up a fence? Probably not. You're going to really want them to bang those surveyor stakes into the ground so you could visually see where my property line is, right? Because otherwise it reads like this. So here is the map now that the municipal tax map, which is basically a plat map of the area, where you could see there's block number and lot number. Now, block and lot numbers are not sufficient legal descriptions of land. What are the three legal descriptions of land? Meets and bounds. Come on, guys, you paying attention here? Meets and bounds. Government survey, also known as a rectangular survey, or a plat map. So the next up is the rectangular survey system, also known as the government survey. It is used in Western states. It is not used in New Jersey or any of the 13 original states. It's established by Congress in 1785. It's a measurement that locates land using principal meridians and baselines, just like airline captains and sea captains of ships used to circumnavigate the globe. They're measured by degrees of latitude and longitude. You ever see the globe in your classrooms in school, and they have those imaginary lines drawn on them? Well, those are the degrees of latitude and longitude. To find areas of land known as townships, which are 36 square miles in size, and within them there are numbered sections. The numbering starts in the upper right-hand corner, 1, and it starts counting to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it starts counting to the right, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on and so forth until you count 36. So I'll show you that in a moment. So a section is 1 square mile. So the rectangular government survey, also known as rectangular survey system, also known as the government survey. It's not just somebody knocking on your door asking you questions. What the government, it's a survey of land that uses the principal meridian, those imaginary lines, the principal meridians and baselines to locate areas of land. And then based on that, they can combine some legal descriptions. They may be able to do a meets and bounds and such, but not in the rectangular survey system. They don't do that. Surveyors can combine legal descriptions of land or a title attorney, but it's usually not done with a rectangular survey system. In New Jersey, we have the government survey, which they could also combine with a plat map. All right, so based on principal meridians and baselines to locate these areas, townships, and sections, and each is identified and referenced by their numbers. So there's 36 square miles, so there's 36 numbered sections within a township, each 1 square mile in size. And then within those sections, then they further break it down to locate individual parcels of land that somebody may own. So let's highlight the rectangular survey system, sometimes called the government survey, was established by Congress in 1785 as early pioneers moved westward. This is a new method. The metes and bounds system of measuring land is the same one that's used in Europe and other parts of the world that we use here in New Jersey still. Only the 13 original states use it. All the other states use the rectangular or government survey system. Okay, so this method was of describing real property is not used in New Jersey or any of the other 13 original states. Okay. What do they say here? In New Jersey, the term township references towns and boroughs. Each one of them is a totally separate entity, and they're unrelated to the other. So basically what they're saying here is when they talk about a township, it has nothing to do, when we talk about municipalities called townships, it has nothing to do with when a surveyor measures land. The term, yeah, they just say here the term township has another meaning. Yeah, it's a unit of measurement, which is 36 miles squared, or 36 square miles, or 6 miles squared. I'm sorry. Everybody got that highlight?
Yes.
Okey-doke. So a township, here, let's do these highlights as well, page 355. This is under the rectangular system. These are units of measure, townships. Each township contains 36 square miles, and a section. A township is further divided into 36 numbered sections. Each section contains 1 square mile. And this is the way a legal description of land using the government or rectangular survey method would look like. So if they ask you on exam, what legal description of land is this? The SE quarter of the SE quarter of the SE quarter of section 1 is 10 acres in size. Well, that would be the government or rectangular survey system. Now, what does that mean? How do you break that down? I'll show you in a moment. Let's just first get the highlights in and let me know when you got it. And don't forget to write down that this is a legal description of land using the government rectangular survey method so you could see what it looks like. Because that may be an exam question like that. Which legal description of land would read this way?
I got it.
Everybody still writing? Okay. So here's a township. How do I know it's a township? Because there's 36 boxes here, 36 squares. Now each township is numbered as well. Like the township could be, this could be township 1568, and within it, properties located at section number 16. As you can see, each section is numbered, and they start counting from right to left, and then left to right, and then right to left, just like you're marching. Left, right, left, right, left, right, right? So within one of those sections now, here's that reading that we seen on the previous page that I just had you highlight, where it would the legal description would read, the SE quarter of the SE quarter of the SE quarter is 10 acres in size. Well, this is what it is. If you look at the entire box here, right? This entire section is a box. And if we were to draw a line straight down the middle and across, it creates 4 quarters, right? So this is the southeast quarter. And if we draw another box through that, this is the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter. And if we draw another box in that, that's the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter. You see how they do that? Not that we need to know how to do that, but because we're not surveyors, but we need to be able to spot what kind of legal description this is. This is a legal description of land using the rectangular or government survey method when it reads this way. Okay. And here's that picture of the globe like we had in our classrooms. Here it is with all those imaginary lines drawn on it, up and down and left to right. And these are known as the principal meridians and baselines. The meridians, they run up north and south, and then we got our baselines, they run east to west. And they're separated by degrees of latitude and longitude around the globe so that we could pinpoint locations. You even seen on my survey, the surveyor didn't just put the measurements of distance and direction around my property. He even wrote down like in minutes and seconds. You know, that's the way the type of navigation that sea ship captains and airline pilots would use. So the last legal description of land is the plat map. We learned about a plat map. A plat is a map of a subdivision, indicating the location and boundaries of the individual properties. And they usually combine legal descriptions in plats of subdivisions because they also, once they locate the property by maybe lot and block number or what have you, then they would then they would combine it with the meets and bounds to do the measurement of distance and direction around the individual parcel of land. Okay, so once again, we have benchmarks. See, you need to know these terms. A lot of these terms will be on exam from the legal descriptions here in Chapter 19. A benchmark's a local permanent benchmark that aids surveyors in their measurements rather than the actual benchmark, which could be miles away. Like they measure sea level or they measure zero elevation as sea level at New York Harbor. The mean sea level at New York Harbor. That's the average sea level in New York Harbor. Not counting any of the outliers where we have storms where the sea levels may temporarily rise and then they fall, so the average sea level at New York Harbor would be the zero elevation point when measuring a datum. So you could have a local benchmark which shows you as of this point at this location how many feet above sea level you are. You've seen those round surveyor markers that I was showing you. It showed you as of this point how many feet the elevation above sea level was. So the surveyor doesn't have to trace his way, all the way to New York Harbor, do a measurement, and then work his way all the way back to your property to find out if you're in a flood zone or not, to check out your elevation. Or to do an elevation check if you're buying a condo that may be a second story unit, and they have to find out what elevation your unit begins and ends. So the datum is that zero sea level at New York Harbor. So the surveyor doesn't got to work their way all the way back there. They could base it. They could start their local measurement based on a local benchmark, rather than the actual benchmark, which could be miles away in New York Harbor. And then monuments are those steel markers that the surveyor pounds into the corners of the property, showing you where you could get a visual look of where your actual property line is. So, meets and bounds. Okay, what is the legal description of land that's only used in the 13 original states? It's a measurement of distance and direction around the property.
Meets and bounds.
Meets and bounds. Which legal description of land begins and ends at a definite designated point, called the POB? Once again, that'll be the meets and bounds. I'm just showing you a lot of different ways that they could ask these questions, right? So you really need to study these to know the legal descriptions. Which legal description of land is used in Western states, which was created by Congress? That would be the government or rectangular survey system. Which legal description of land uses degrees of latitude and longitude to locate areas of land? The rectangular or government survey. Which legal description of land uses townships and sections as units of measure? The rectangular or government survey. You see the different ways that they could ask these questions? And which legal description of land is used to measure out subdivisions? That would be a plat map. A map of a subdivision locating the individual properties locations. That would be a plat map. So a plat is a map of a subdivision to locate individual properties by lot and block number, and combines the meets and bounds measurement of each individual property boundaries. Every municipalities consists of many subdivisions that were built over the years as the municipalities were being developed. The tax maps are basically all the subdivision maps stitched together. Description of land designated by lot and block number in order to locate on the map. A plat map is a map of a subdivision. Land is divided into blocks and lots and indicates streets and access roads for public use. Subdivision plat for condominium descriptions could also reference elevation for each floor, where each floor begins and ends. That's where your unit would begin and end. So it's a map now in 3 dimensions. You're measuring elevation as well. Here's another simple plat map of little subdivision here, 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 and they stitched them together. So a plat of a subdivision on page 356 is a map of a subdivision. A plat of a subdivision filed with the clerk in the county where the land is located. Okay. You should also write this because I have down here, I wrote down the different pages in this book where there are other plat maps that you could find and look at too as a reference if you wanted to. Here's another one of those plat maps on page
I
343.
need a second.
Oh, okay.
I got it.
Okay. Everybody good? Okay. So here's a plat map. Here's another example of a plat map where there's 8 lots. It's a small subdivision. It looks like somebody took their property, subdivided it. They put a street over here. This is called a cul-de-sac, where it's a dead-end street that has that circle, the wider part at the end, so people can turn around. Very specific with their sizes of the streets, though, now. So that fire trucks can fit down these roads and garbage trucks and do those turns without having to back up down the street. And you see each individual lot is consecutively numbered: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They got a measurement of distance and direction around each of the individual lots as well. So this is a plat map. There it is again, where it's pointed out a little bit, where now you can see where the street is, and this is the property, and that it's getting subdivided into smaller lots. And this is the street that's highlighted in red. Here's another example of a municipal tax map, which was a plat map at some point in time of a subdivision of all of these different streets. And here's the block numbers. You could spot them. Usually they're bold in rectangles like this or in circles. And then each individual lot is consecutively numbered on the block. And you can see the lot sizes on each one as well if you were to zoom in. And you can see these maps, they just get stitched together, because you can see here it says sheet 24. Up here, this matches up to sheet 25, and over here, this matches up to sheet 26, and this one to sheet number 30. You know, sheet number 22 over here, so I guess it's broken up. So you could add all these other different plat maps to this one to start building out kind of like a puzzle. So a licensed surveyor is the one, that's what we call those people who measure out the land, those areas of land. They're called surveyors. So we use licensed surveyors to measure out the land and draw the maps. We need them anytime we do any construction. We need to know the layout of the land. Also, maybe if we need to get an elevation study to find out if a property's in a flood zone or not. When are surveys used? Well, conveying a portion of a part of a lot, you're placing a mortgage, you're determining a legal description, you're subdividing land, or you're doing any kind of construction. I got my survey, which I showed you, because I wanted to get I got an updated survey because I want to tear down my shed and put up a new shed that's even bigger too. I needed to know where the property lines are to submit this to the municipality. They have an old survey and they wanted a newer one, so I got a newer one for them. And so this one pointed out where my current shed is, and that the neighbors. I got two neighbors here to my backing, and the fence is. Here's the property line in bold, and then you can see the fence line coming off of it. Here is an example of a survey marker that's just a piece of wood with the ribbon on it. Now, this guy just put that as a marker instead of a instead of a steel piece of rebar, because there's already a steel piece of rebar there. He actually dug up and showed me in the ground at that point where the steel piece of rebar was, which he could have always just tried to pull up, but they'll usually just do this, leave it where it is, banged into the ground so that it can be easily located with a what do you call it? The metal detector. But how come the survey marker is all the way in like this far in, and it's not right here at the edge of the curb? Well, do you know that your municipality has an easement right to the first 6 feet of your property, and so do the utility companies, like this one that's got this pole right here, which, by the way, I'm getting them to move it over here. You can see it here again. See, it seems like more than 6 feet, but that's where they begin their measurement. So it's enough for you to have that foot or two of space over here. Then you have a sidewalk. Their sidewalks are like 4 feet. And then you have another foot or two over here on this side. So that's that's about 6 feet, I guess, 6 feet-ish. And you can see the curve in the road that the survey measured, right? See it again. So that's right here in the curve in the road. All right, so condominium descriptions, these are units referenced to floor elevations and ceilings where they could do a data measurement of elevation. So the mean sea level at New York Harbor is 0 elevation. That is the datum. Large cities establish local official datums. They may have their benchmarks locally. So let's highlight the definition now on page 357 for datum and benchmarks.
I got it.
Okay. So once again, here's the complete slide with the explanation for benchmarks, datum, monuments, meets and bounds, rectangular and government survey, and the plat map. If you want to take a picture and have all those notes there on one slide to study from, well, there you go. It's all on one page there for you if you want to snap a picture and you have not yet. This is one that has everything in one place. Okay. Anyone need more time to try to take a picture of this or screenshot? Okay. So a deed is a written instrument. So that concludes the legal descriptions of land and the surveying. Now we're going to go over deeds. All right. So a deed is a written instrument where an owner of real estate intentionally conveys their rights, like air rights and mineral rights, subsurface rights, title, their ownership, or interest, the partial ownership interest in the property. So The parties to a deed are the grantor, that's the one who's granting their ownership to someone else. They're selling or giving away the land. And the grantee is the buyer who acquires the title, the one who's getting it, who's receiving it. Remember words that end in OR and words that end in EE, the person that's giving and the one that's getting. So we grant ownership. So the grantor is the one who's selling or giving the land. The grantee is the one who's getting it. So the grantor, the seller, must sign the deed in order for it to be valid. Deeds are not valid unless they've been signed by the seller. It's not required that the grantee sign the deed for it to be valid, because deeds transfer the ownership upon delivery and acceptance of the deed. It does not need to be signed by the buyer. However, in order for the buyer to record the deed in the public records, then they need to sign it and have their signatures notarized to show that they are valid and they are who they say they are. Now, deeds do not need to be dated because the transfer of ownership takes place upon delivery and acceptance of the deed. So whenever that happens, that's when the transfer of ownership takes place. Deeds must be signed and dated, and the signatures acknowledged. That means proven that they're genuine by all parties confirming their identities, either by a notary, a judge, attorney, or other trusted person like an elected politician. Trusted person. Before it can be recorded in the public record. So deeds are valid even if not recorded in the public record. It is, however, in both the buyer and seller's best interest to ensure that those deeds are recorded as soon as possible. So there's 4 common types of deeds used here in New Jersey. They're the full covenant and warranty deed, the bargain and sale deed with covenants against Grantors Act, often abbreviated as CAG, or Covenants versus Grantors Act, abbreviated as CVG, which is the same thing. So bargain and sale deed with covenants against Grantors Act. Covenants, those are legal promises, right, that we put in deeds. And a bargain and sale deed. So a bargain and sale CAG or CVG deed is totally different than a bargain and sale deed without the CAG or CVG behind it. Okay, those are totally different deeds. So don't get lazy and just say bargain and sale deed when you're meaning to say bargain and sale CAG. They're totally different deeds. The bargain and sale deed without any covenants, there's no legal promises that are coming with it. We're going to go over the differences between these deeds in a moment, and then we also have a quitclaim deed. So let's highlight what a deed is on page 357. A deed is a written instrument which an owner of real estate intentionally conveys their right, title, or interest in a parcel of real estate. And the owner who sells or gives the land is referred to as the grantor. They're granting their ownership to someone else. And the new owner who acquires that title is called the grantee. Remember, deeds only need to be signed by the grantor, the seller. And as long as the grantee, the buyer, is identified in that deed, they're named in the deed, they could always sign it later and get it acknowledged, their signatures acknowledged. So we'll highlight here types of deeds, and then right here protection, and then put an arrow on both sides and have most to the least. So the deeds that offer the most protection to the deeds that offer the least protection are full covenant and warranty deed. That's a full warranty, also known as a general warranty. It goes by several other names, which I'll probably show you on the next slide. Any alternative names for any of these deeds?
We got it already.
Okay. Everybody good on this? Guess so. So here we go. My rendition of that slide cleans it up a little bit better, right? And it gives you all the alternate names for the deeds. The warranty deed, also the full warranty deed, the warranty deed, also known as a general warranty or full covenant and warranty deed, offers the most protections of any deed. Then we have the most common type of deed used here in New Jersey, particularly, is the bargain and sale CAG deed. It could say CAG or it could say covenants against grantors. It's the same thing as a bargain and sale CVG, covenants versus grantors. You guys ever see like court documents, court papers that says this person against that person or this person versus that person? It's no difference, right? So it's the same kind of a scenario here. These are also known as special warranty or limited warranty deeds. And why is that? We'll get into it, but I could give you a quick rundown really quick. The bargain and sale CAG deed is it's a limited warranty or special warranty where only the owner grants that they have done nothing to encumber the property while it was in their possession, and they don't guarantee the quality of the deed as to the time that anybody else owned the property before them. Only, yeah, that's like me saying, I'm selling you my property and I'm promising you, I'm making a legal promise to you that I have done nothing to encumber the property while it was in my ownership possession. I'm not giving you any warranties as to the quality of the title that anybody that's ever owned it before me throughout time, throughout history. For that, do your own due diligence. Get a title search and the title insurance policy. And basically, that's what the bargain and sale CAG type deed does. That's what it says to these buyers. Then we have a straight bargain and sale deed. A bargain and sale deed without covenants it just says bargain and sale deed. This is also known as a straight bargain and sale deed because it's just bargain and sale without any covenants attached. No legal covenants are legal promises. Sometimes used in auctions and called the sheriff's deed. Sometimes it's used in tax sales and other kinds of sheriff's auctions. And then lastly, we have a quitclaim deed, where somebody doesn't even need to be the owner of the property to sign one of these. By signing a quitclaim deed, you're just saying, hey, I give up any interest that I have in this property, not saying that I have any interest in this property. So if I don't have any interest in this property and I sign a quitclaim deed, what do you get as a buyer? Nothing. You just wanted me to sign off any interest that I have in the property without me even claiming that I do have interest. So if I don't have any interest and I give you a quitclaim deed, you gain nothing. But if I am the owner of the property and I sign a quitclaim deed, it can just as effectively transfer that ownership as a full warranty deed can. It's just that I'm not making any legal promises as to the quality of the title. It's often used for simple transfers within families or divorce settlements, etc. So let's look at this. Let's highlight the warranty, general warranty. And these are all the legal promises that are made in that full warranty deed, which we're going to go over on the next slide, which I have some explanations that simplify it up a little bit. And this is an interesting thing here as well. So let's do these highlights and notes. Let me know when you got it, and I'll move on to the next slide.
I got it.
Okay, okie dokie. So These are the legal promises that are made in a full warranty, full covenant warranty, or general warranty deed. Those are the different names that it goes by. The covenant of season. The grantor warrants that they're the owner of the property and they have the legal right to sell it. Yeah, you want to make sure that the owner has the legal right to sell the property before you buy it from them, right? That would make sense. Then the covenant against encumbrances. The grantor warrants the properties free from any liens or encumbrances and are willing to defend it. An encumbrance is a claim by another or a liability against real estate, such as taxes or judgments or other liens that have not been paid back, restrictive covenants, easements, licenses, etc., that may diminish the use or value of the property, which the grantee, the buyer, was not previously made aware of. Can you buy a property that's encumbered by something? Sure, you can. But you would want to know what those encumbrances are and have the seller disclose them. You don't want any encumbrances popping up that you are unaware of. So if that does happen, well, the owner has to warranty you against that. They only disclose to you certain encumbrances that they may have. So any additional encumbrances that you discover that pop up, they have to clear up or reimburse you for. Covenant of quiet enjoyment. This is a guarantee that the title is good against third-party claims against it and will defend it in court if anyone claims rights or ownership. The covenant of further assurance. The grantor promises to obtain any instruments needed to make the title good, basically to produce the evidence in court to fight to protect your quality of your title there. And the covenant of warranty forever states that if these promises, these warranties ever fail, the grantor will reimburse the grantee for any loss sustained. Now that sounds great on paper, but if you don't have the money, what good is it, right? You can't get blood from a stone. So these covenants are not limited to matters that occurred during the time the grantor owned the property. They extend back to all previous owners since the beginning of time, since the beginning of record keeping here in the United States, since we became a country and we had the land, and then we could sell that land because now we have our owners and it's our land, and then we could sell it. Okay, so that's a lofty promise to make. How could you make promises that not just the time that I own the property, but any time throughout history since we became a country, that the land ownership has not been improperly transferred at any time? That's a lofty promise. If somebody's able to step forward and lay claim that they're the rightful owner because there was an improper transfer in time and they could produce the documents or evidence to prove it, you got to give up that land. Why? I bought it from Joe Smith the other day. Yeah, but there was an improper transfer well before Joe Smith ever owned it. So he didn't have the right to sell it to you. It's like buying stolen property. Do you get to keep the stolen TV even though you paid for it? You paid the thief who sold you the TV? You don't get to keep the TV. It's the same situation here. Even though the person may have been unaware that there was an improper transfer so that the land was stolen, they may not have even known it or been aware of it, but we are aware of it now. So that means that all sales are invalidated. So you'd have to give up that land. So where does that leave you? You got a mortgage out on a property. Now you don't have a house to live in or a property. Well, that's why the owner who sold you the property gave you that warranty deed. You'd have to chase after them for reimbursement. So I hope they got the money to reimburse you for the loss sustained. If not, this is why I say the warranty deed, the full warranty deed, makes a lot of promises. But the thing is, you're screwed if they don't have the money to back them up. You know, it's the deed that offers the most guarantees of any deed, the most warranties, the most legal promises. But if the person doesn't have the money to reimburse you, you're screwed. You're out of luck, right? So I think the best one is the way that we do it here in New Jersey, where we do the bargain and sale deed with covenants against grantors, where the owner says, I did nothing to encumber the property while it was in my possession. However, anyone that owned it before me, you got to do a title search and get a title insurance policy, which will insure you against any losses sustained. And then the insurance company would have to pay you. So that's this one, the bargain and sale CAG type deed, also known as CVG type, Covenants Against Grantors or Covenants versus Grantors Act. The grantor, that's the seller, is willing to warrant that to the grantee. They're willing to warrant or guarantee that they have done nothing to encumber the property while they owned it, while it was in their possession. No guarantees are made about any previous owners and the time that they own the property. The current owner states that they have done nothing to encumber it while it was in their possession only. That's the only legal promise that they're making. So this is sometimes called a limited warranty or special warranty deed for obvious reasons. It's the most commonly used deed in New Jersey, plus the buyer gets title insurance. So they order a title search, and then the title company will do a very thorough search of the public records to make sure there were no improper transfers in the past, and that then they'll issue an insurance policy. Now, there's usually two title insurance policies that are purchased. It is one that covers the lender for any outstanding remaining balance on the loan, and one that covers the buyer for any money that they've laid out so far. So let's highlight these things. You guys got those highlights?
Yes.
Okay, so everybody got these notes, right?
Yep.
Okay, so a bargain and sale deed, also known as a straight bargain and sale deed, does not have any covenants with it. Those are those legal promises. The seller is only saying that they have the legal right to sell the property. They're not guaranteeing the quality of the title to the property. They're not making any express warranties that there's not any other liens or encumbrances or improper transfers or anything. They're just saying, well, improper transfers, I guess there would, but they're just saying that they've done nothing. I'm sorry, they're just saying that they have the legal right to sell the property. They're not even saying that they've done nothing to encumber the property. All they're saying is that they have a legal right to sell it. This is why it's usually used at sheriff sales. You know, the sheriff's department saying, "Hey, we got a legal right to sell the property. We're not guaranteeing you the quality of the title at all." So Caveat emptor is how this is pronounced. You could add this term to your definition sheet. It's not pronounced caveat emptor, even though it's spelt that way. It's a Latin term. It means let the buyer beware in Latin. Caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. So this type of deed is often used in sheriff sales, foreclosures, and tax sales. It contains no express warranties whatsoever. It only implies that the grantor, the seller, holds title to the property and has the legal right to sell it. That's it. No other promises other than we have the legal right to sell you the property. And then we have a quitclaim deed. Lastly, the quitclaim deed provides the least amount of protection of any deed. It carries no covenants or warranties whatsoever. It doesn't even imply the person signing it has ownership or any rights to the property or interests in it. Only that they're giving up any claims of interests. They're willing to give up any rights or claims to interest without saying they have any rights or claims of interest in the property. You could just say, yeah, I'll give up my interest in this property. I could sign a quitclaim deed on your property. That just basically is me just saying, hey, I give up my rights and interest in your property. Not saying that I have any, which I don't. So what do you gain by me signing a quitclaim deed? I guess the assurance that I can't make any claims on your property to claim ownership or any rights or interest in it. But if I don't have any rights or interest in it, you really gain nothing by me signing a quitclaim deed. However, it can just as effectively transfer the ownership as a full covenant and warranty deed if I did. It's most often used for simple transfers within a family, transferring property during divorce settlements, or to clear up clouds on a title, like to mend a break or gap in the chain of title. So quitclaim deed can just as effectively transfer that ownership as a full covenant and warranty deed can, if the person signing it has all the rights and interest in the property to sell. So let's highlight this on page 363 and this on page 364.
I got it.
Everybody good?
Yes, I got it.
Okay. So now we're going to go over the anatomy of a deed, the different parts of a deed, the things that have to be added into deeds. So you have to have just like any contract, you have to have a grantor that has the legal capacity to execute the deed. They got to be of sound mind and legal age. The the grantee has to be named with reasonable certainty that they could be readily identified. There has to be a consideration stated, which is the full purchase price that the parties are giving and receiving from each other. The granting clause is the heart of any deed. It explains what exactly is being sold or conveyed or transferred there. And a habendum clause usually follows the granting clause. It explains anything that requires further clarification that was maybe mentioned in the granting clause that requires further clarification. And it always begins with the words to have and to hold. So the habendum clause always begins with the words to have and to hold. So I kind of mispronounced this one to remember it. It's the have been to hold clause. The habendum clause is the have been to hold clause. Have been to hold, have been to hold, right? That's the way I remember that one. It begins with the words to have been to hold. And then the legal description of the real estate, which we learned about early in this chapter, which is the meets and bounds, the government or rectangular survey, and the plat map. Those are the three legal descriptions of land. Your address of your property, while it may be useful in describing what we're talking about, is not considered a legal description of land. Did you know that the post office can change your address of your house without even getting your permission to? That they could just notify you that they changed your address? Wow. Now you got to change all your documents, your driver's license, your passport, everything. You got to change all of your documents, the address on them. And I memorized my address. I got it. I know it by heart. Now I got to get a new address, and I got to have a new address I got to learn. I seen the post office do that before, where a new house was built. Instead of creating like another number in between or putting a letter at the end of the number or a dash, they shifted all the address numbers all the way down the block. So everybody's address changed on the block. This happened in Elizabeth. It was the weirdest thing. I didn't know that they could do that. Well, see, you learn things, and now I'm sharing with you. It's the weirdest thing, isn't it? To have that done. So deeds do not have to be dated in order to be valid or signed by the buyer. They're still valid unless they try to record the deed in the public record, and then everybody's signature is required before it can be recorded. So the buyer's signature should be acknowledged as well. That means proven that it's genuine because you signed in front of a notary, a judge, an attorney, or other trusted publicly elected official. Politicians. So these are the requirements for the valid conveyance. All that same stuff that I just went over on the previous slide with a little bit of an explanation, though. You can highlight here, deeds do not need to be dated in order to be valid, and then right there, or signed by the buyer unless they want to record it.
I got it.
All right. Now here's the full breakdown of all the parts of a deed. You have the grantor, the seller. They have to be 18 years of age or older to effectively convey, or the contract may be voidable. It must be, you must have legal capacity to execute, to sign that deed. You got to be sound mind and legal age. Even though we're going to need to know that technically, even though it's incorrect in real life, we need to know technically for exam purposes only that a minor can sign a deed to convey real property only when is a minor considered an adult that they could legally sign a deed to convey the ownership of real property?
Is it if they're like 18 and above?
You're a minor when you're below 18. You know, in an earlier chapter, I told you guys that minors can be considered adults in certain situations, but not really anymore because the laws have changed, but the exams have not. So you'll still have questions on this. When can a minor legally sign a deed and be considered a competent adult that the contract will be legally binding? And that's when they're married. Remember, minors can't be married under any circumstances anymore legally. I showed you the proof of that from the legal websites that showed you the law was changed. However, on exams, when can a minor be considered an adult and the contract valid? If they're married. I know. Even though they can't be married anymore. Well, so the exams did not catch up to the law. Okay. They're incorrect. There's no situation where a minor can ever sign contracts and be valid because minors cannot be married in New Jersey. So it's tangled web we weave. I try explaining it to the real estate commission, and they don't know what I'm talking about. And the people at PSI that created the exam, they're like, well, we're not the ones that create the exams. Those are other people within our company. I'm like, well, let them freaking know. Change the exam, update the damn thing, you know. So either way, nothing. I will assume nothing has changed there. So make sure that a minor can sign a deed, can sign a contract to sell real property, and they'll be considered an adult and it'll be considered valid, even though technically they can't be married in New Jersey. All right. So, consideration to be valid, all deeds must contain a clause acknowledging receipt of something as consideration. That is the full payment, what the parties give or receive from each other in the exchange that is of value, which could be legal tender, which is money or a mortgage loan, a fair exchange of goods or services, like with bartering, I'll give you this in exchange, you can give me that, or I'll do this for you if you give me that. Or love and affection. Love and affection, that would be a gift between perhaps relatives, maybe a parent and a child. They have love and affection for each other. Courts do see that as something of value, as long as it's accompanied by a letter stating that it is, in fact, a gift. So that letter would be referred to as an affidavit, a sworn statement explaining the transaction as a gift. The granting clause is the heart of any deed. It is the meat and potatoes of any deed. It is the heart of the deed. It explains what type of deed is being used, what is exactly being transferred, title, rights, interest, the partial ownership interest, how the new owners are taking ownership. Remember, if you're taking ownership as joint tenants, you have to specify that in the deed. Otherwise, by default, you're tenants in common. So you have to specify in the deed. Where would you do that? You do that in the granting clause. So the types of tenancy, whether it's tenancy in severalty, tenancy in common, joint tenancy, or tenancy by the entirety. The habendum clause follows the granting clause. It always begins with the words to have and to hold. And anytime something is stated in the granting clause that requires further clarification, that would be clarified in the habendum clause, the following clause. So its provisions must not be contradictory to whatever is said in the granting clause. They're there to shore up whatever is said in the granting clause with further clarifications. Like if you need to clarify that there's two owners, you and I bought a property together. So by default, we're tenants in common, right? Unless we're married, then it would be tenancy by the entirety, but we're not. So we would be tenants in common. We could state that we're joint tenants, but we'd have to state that in the deed. But if we're not joint tenants, we're tenants in common. And I put up 25% of the cash and you put up 75% of the cash. Well, we're 50-50 owners unless we specifically specify in the deed that there's another arrangement. So where would you specify that? In the habendum clause. We could clarify this by saying that you're 75% owner because you put up 75% of the cash. Or if we don't have equal shares, or naming a remainder man if it's a life estate. That would be done in the habendum clause. You got to name who the remainder man is. So those things would be written in the habendum clause. A description of the real estate, remember the three legal descriptions, meets and bounds, rectangular or government survey, or a plat map. So although lot and block numbers and an address are helpful describing the property, they're not legal descriptions of land. Any exceptions or reservations that are to be added to the deed, what do we call those restrictions that are placed by private parties in deeds? They're called restrictive covenants. So you could put those restrictions in deeds, and what do we call those estates in land that are ownership forever that are based on restrictions? They're called fee determinable, defeasible fee, or conditional fee estates, which we went over in chapter 6 on page 104. So I got the cross references for everything here. And then the signature by the grantor. The seller needs to sign the deed. They don't need to date it. The buyer's signature and date, well, that gets done when they get their signatures acknowledged if they sign the deed before they record it. But the deed is still valid even if it does not have the buyer's signature on it, because the buyer is named in the deed so that they're readily identifiable who they are. An acknowledgement provides evidence that the signatures are genuine to prevent forgeries, usually by a witness, by a notary, judge, attorney, or elected official. And those are all the legal requirements to convey property. So if you like my descriptions and how I put them all together in a nice compact format with the anatomy of a deed there, and I put together a lot of the things that we've learned in other chapters all together in this one page as well, you may want to take a screenshot.
I got it.
All right. Anybody else taking one? Should I wait or can I turn the page?
I got it.
All right. So we went over exceptions and reservations affecting the title, the signature of the grantor to seller, an acknowledgement that shows their signature is genuine. You got to have delivery and acceptance. Implied is possible as well. Implied delivery and acceptance. To be valid, a deed must contain a clause acknowledging the grantor's receipt of something as the consideration, the thing that was given of value between the parties. Remember, for any contract to be valid, there has to be something the parties give or receive from each other. There has to be something of value to each party. Otherwise, the contract cannot be legally enforced. You can't have a one-sided contract that only one person benefits from it. So let's highlight that to be valid, deeds must contain a clause acknowledging the grantor's receipt of something as consideration. Consideration is defined as something of value offered by one party and accepted by another as an inducement to perform or refrain from performing some acts. This is just general contract law. Consideration must be good and valuable between the parties. They have to have value to it. So in many states, a nominal consideration of $1 or other valuable considerations customary. In New Jersey, however, a deed is not acceptable for recording in the public records unless it states the full sales price. Now, sometimes you may see in those public records a deed listed with $1 as the sale price. Well, that could have been that the owner just refinanced the property and then they put it down as $1 because there was no actual sale. Or there was a gift and it was accompanied by that affidavit, but it also just says $1 there. So what is an affidavit? It's a sworn statement.
Got it.
All right. Now the habendum clause. We could highlight that the habendum clause follows the granting clause, begins with the words to have and to hold. And I wrote over here, it further clarifies terms stated in the granting clause, like percentage of ownership or naming a remainder man. And I just realized that it's all in my chicken scratch and I did not write over it. So let me type over it so you guys can have it legible. Put that in there. You guys get all those notes yet? Or are you still writing?
Yeah, I'm good.
I got it too.
All right, so the signature of the grantor, that's the seller. It needs, all the sellers need to sign. Okay, so to prove that, now here's an interesting thing. To be valid, a deed must be signed by all the grantors named in the deed. A grantor's signature may be signed by an attorney in fact acting under a power of attorney. You guys remember where we went over what an attorney in fact is and what a power of attorney is? Power of attorney is that document that gives somebody the legal right to sign documents on your behalf as if you were there signing them yourself. The thing is, this document that gives that authority to somebody to sign documents on your behalf is only valid while you're alive. Okay, so because of that, sometime after the day that these documents are signed, we need to prove that the owner was still alive at the time that you signed them. So the way to do that is just to get the owner to appear before a notary producing ID, and then the notary just has them sign off, and the notary confirms that this person has appeared before me today. Because if you appeared before me today, that means yesterday you were still alive, right? So, and then that document should be recorded in a public record along with the documents that were signed by the attorney in fact, as well as that power of attorney. So that if anybody ever does a title search in the future, they could be like, well, who is this person that signed these deeds? That wasn't the owner. And then you could see, because it's attached in the public record, that they were given the authority to sign the documents on behalf of the owner. And then there was another document that said that the owner was still alive when that document was signed. So now you could do a title search and you could clarify everything very easily. Does that make sense? Everybody understand that? Yes, no.
Can you repeat that?
Sure, I can. This is, see, if you need further clarification or me to repeat it, just let me know. So you guys remember me talking to and explaining to you guys what a power of attorney is. It's a document where you give somebody else the permission to sign documents on your behalf. You're granting them that authority with this document called the power of attorney. You with me so far?
Yeah.
Now, a power of attorney is only valid while you're alive. So if I give you the authority to sign documents on my behalf, you could only do that while I'm alive, not after I'm dead. So if I gave you a power of attorney to sign deeds or whatever documents to transfer the ownership of my real estate because I wasn't going to be around, so I gave you the power of attorney to do that on my behalf. After that day, I need to appear before a notary to sign an affidavit that I have appeared before them. Because if I appeared before the notary the next day, then that means the previous day where you signed the documents, I was alive then. So therefore, your signature on those documents is valid. Does that make sense? Or did I
Yes.
lose you? Did you get it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's all it is. It's just producing all the evidence, creating a paper trail. And we're going to record all those documents, the deed, the power of attorney, and that affidavit from the notary saying that I appeared before them, so therefore I was alive the day that you signed the documents that I gave you the authority to sign on my behalf.
So if they don't appear in front of the notary, does that mean like that you can't?
That
Yeah.
means it could be questioned in the future.
Okay.
It's a big question mark. You know,
Okay.
was he alive when she signed the paperwork for him? You
Mm,
know, we don't know, right? Not unless we had some kind of evidence, right? So
right.
if anybody in the future ever searches the public records, they're going to be like, who the hell was this that signed the documents? She's not listed as the owner. Why did she sign the deed? Was some hanky panky going on here? Did something wrong go on? How did this? Why was this person signing the documents? Who gave her the authority to? I mean, we got a power of attorney that we got here, but uh, was the uh, so that's why the power of attorney needs to be recorded in a public record so that we can see that you were given the power of attorney to sign the documents on my behalf. But that's not enough. We also need to prove, because a power of attorney is only valid while the person who gave you that authority is still alive. So we need to make sure that that person was still alive by having them sign an affidavit that they appeared before a notary that day or the next day or sometime thereafter.
Okay, makes sense. Thank
Yeah. So what is an acknowledgement? We know that an acknowledgement, the purpose of an acknowledgement is to prevent forgeries. So what is an acknowledgement? It's a declaration made by a person who's signing a document before a notary public or authorized public officer. The acknowledgement usually states that the person signing the deed or other document is known to the officer or has produced sufficient identifications. The acknowledgement provides evidence that the signature is genuine in order to prevent forgery. Although an acknowledgement is usually made before a notary public, it can be taken by a judge, attorney, or other qualified person. And although an acknowledgement is not required to make a deed valid, in New Jersey, all deeds, mortgages, and similar documents must be acknowledged before they can be recorded in the public records. So each document must be signed before a notary public, other authorized public official, before a witness who must attest to the validity of the grantor's signature. The signature of the witness would then be acknowledged before the authorized public official as well. From purely a practical point of view, a deed is not acknowledged if it's not a satisfactory instrument, or a deed that is not acknowledged is not a satisfactory instrument, because we have not proven that the right people signed it. So although an unrecorded deed is valid between the grantor and the grantee, it does not protect against claims by subsequent innocent purchasers. So if you had a seller, they signed a deed, they name you as the buyer in the deed, and they hand you the deed. Is that a valid deed? Are you now the owner of the property? Yes, you are, because deeds do not need to be signed by the buyer in order for them to be valid. They just need to be signed by the buyer before they can record them in the public record. But because you didn't go and record it in the public record, you still have a valid deed and you're still the owner. However, what if I was an unscrupulous seller and then later that day I print out another deed and I name someone else as the buyer, and I sign the deed and I give it to them? Who's the owner of the property? I signed two deeds naming two different people as the buyers, as the owner. Who's the owner? Since they're not dated, there's no timestamp on them, and they're valid if they're not signed by the buyer. But if there's two deeds out there floating around, who is the rightful owner now? The race is on. Whoever records their interest in the public record first is the owner. The other one got to find me, take me to court, and try to get their money back. So that's what they mean by it doesn't protect the claims by subsequent innocent purchasers. It kind of leaves that whole scenario, whole sordid scenario, out of the situation. So to help assure good title, a grantee should always require acknowledgement of the grantor's signature on a deed so that it may be recorded. So the grantor is the seller. So the seller's signature should be acknowledged, and so should the buyer's, and then it should be recorded in a public record as soon as possible to prevent any such chicanery, I guess they call it, horsing around. All right. Everybody good? Everybody got this? If so, it's that time for lunch break. So
Yeah,
uh,
got it.
I'm going to pause right here. Right. So corporation can convey real estate only upon a proper resolution passed by its board of directors. Right? Did we leave off here? What happened there? Oh, we were on a different slide. We were. Okay. All right. So this is where we left off. Delivery and acceptance. Okay. So before a title can transfer, by before that conveyance can take effect, delivery and acceptance has to take place. So delivery and acceptance is when the ownership, when it's said that ownership transfers, when title transfers upon delivery and acceptance of the deed itself. Now, let's highlight that because we need to know that for exams. We need to study that. We need to know that the transfer of ownership of real estate happens upon delivery and acceptance of the deed itself. Now, what do you suppose happens when people don't know how to read or write? How did we transfer the ownership of real estate in the Middle Ages? Um, well, there's a little story here that talks about when people were uh, illiterate, they didn't know how to read or write. And, this happens also when you have kings and queens and emperors. The way to stay in power is to keep people dumbed down. Okay. Um, Seems like our politicians are doing that again and encouraging that with our great college courses that they're offering, and people can't get jobs afterwards because they're useless degrees that they're getting. Well, we should not be forgiving them for their loans that they take out for those useless degrees. They made those stupid decisions to take these classes that are nonsense just to be in college and then to get indoctrinated to be thinking in anti-American ways and such. But either way, you keep the nation dumbed down, there's little that they could do. But anyway, how did the ownership of real estate transfer in the Middle Ages when few people knew how to read or write? Well, this is the way that it happened. If you guys remember those Schoolhouse Rock, you know, conjunction junction, what's your function? What is a bill? All those little PSA cartoon messaging education for children after school. Well, think of those cheesy little cartoon characters and those voiceovers when I read this little story to you about how in England during the Middle Ages, when few people were literate, how did the transfer of ownership take place? So it took place like this. The seller took the buyer to the field in question and they walked the boundaries. This was known as the beating of the bounds. Then the seller reached down and they took a clod of that dirt that represented the land in question. Uh, they handed it to the buyer, and at the moment that the buyer seized that clod, they became the owner of the land. Today, a document is used instead of a clod of earth, but title's still said to transfer at the moment of delivery and acceptance, and the owner still said to be seized of the land, just like they seized the clod of that of soil from that field that was sold. The word season still denotes ownership and control. So they use that term season a lot in the deed, right? The covenants of the different covenants that we were reading about. They use the term season. You're seized of the land. You're in control of it. You're in possession of it. You have the right to sell it. You're seized the land. But I don't know how would they transfer their ownership of the property back then. What do you do now that you're the new owner? How do you prove that you're the owner? What do you keep that clod of dirt that was handed to you in a bowl or something, and then you show it to people? you know, hard to prove, right? Unless you got it in writing. So I guess that's why a lot of people got screwed over during the Middle Ages. and they just get conquered and taken over. But when does the transfer of ownership of real estate take place? I know this stuff. Upon delivery and acceptance of the deed itself. You guys should be answering that. I already know this stuff. All right, so how do corporations transfer the ownership of the real estate they own? Well, with a proper resolution passed by its board of directors. You can't just come in here and say, hey, I'm going to list my property for sale with your real estate agent, you. Yeah, I want to list my property for sale. And it's listed as being owned by a corporation. And then you take a listing from somebody who claims that it's their property, and then you put it up on the market for sale. You need to first prove that this person or that person needs to prove to you, and you should make sure that they prove to you first that they have the authorization to represent that corporation and and they have the authority to sell the property. Does that make sense? Doesn't make sense? You guys don't understand that? Or you do understand
Can
that?
you explain that again?
Yeah, a corporation. Somebody comes to you, you're a salesperson. Somebody comes to you and says they want to sell their property, but the property is listed as owned by a corporation. Do you just take that listing from this person that says that, well, it's my company, I'm going to sell it? Or do you need some kind of proof that they're an authorized officer of that corporation and they have the right to sell the property?
We need the proof.
You need some kind of proof from them. You can't just take their word that they're the owner of the company and then, oh, okay, so we'll list the property for sale. We got to show that you have the authorization. And the way to do that is they need to produce a resolution that's passed by their board of directors showing that they've been granted the authority as the authorized person to represent the corporation. It's just like you can't just go into a bank and say, I want to open a bank account for this corporation. You got to prove that you're related to that corporation in some way, shape, or form. You can't just open up a bank account in the name of a corporation. You need to prove that you are some sort of an authorized officer and you're related to that corporation, have the authority to open a bank account for that corporation. So same thing is expected, no less is expected when you go to try to sell real estate that's owned by a corporation. So, highlight a corporation can convey real estate only upon a proper resolution passed by its board of directors. You have to be elected as the authorized officer to act on behalf of the corporation. So you're going to need some kind of a document where the board of directors elected you to be that authorized officer. And that would be done in what we call a resolution. A resolution is a document. When they vote on it, they came to a resolution that you're going to be the representative of this corporation. So then that person now has a document showing that they're the authorized representative. So under the law, corporations considered to be a legal entity, even though it's an artificial person. 3 basic rules must be followed when corporations are to convey real estate. Corporation can convey real estate only upon a proper resolution passed by its board of directors, showing the person has the authority to do so. And then if all or a substantial portion of corporation's real estate is being conveyed, it's also usually required that a resolution authorizing the sale be secured from the stockholders. That's only when all or a substantial, the majority of the real estate is being conveyed by them. Deed to real estate must be signed only by the authorized officer that was given that authority to represent the corporation to sell that property, and they were granted that authority by a resolution properly passed by the board of directors. So the corporate seal doesn't need to be affixed to the conveyance unless there's unless the acknowledgement mentions that there's a seal that needs to be used. Okay. So how can a corporation sell real estate? Only upon a proper resolution passed by its board of directors. And who can sign the documents on behalf of the corporation? An authorized officer who's been granted that authority by the board of directors. Got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Okey doke. So that's the end of chapter 19. Let's do the key terms to review for chapter 19 now. There are two key terms to review for this chapter. Let's start with one on page 368. One who receives property through a deed. What do we call the person who receives the property through a deed? What do we call it when somebody transfers property through a deed? They're granting their ownership. So what do you call the person who receives property through a deed? They're the grantee. The grantee. Remember, the OR is the person who's giving whatever the root word is, and words that end in EE is the one that's receiving it. All right, so 9 is A. A deed implying the grantor owns the property, but nothing more. You're saying, what's the type of deed that says the person has a legal right to sell the property and makes no legal promises other than that?
Granting clause?
No. What type of deed? Not clause in a deed, but what type of deed? That implies the grantor owns the property and has the right to sell it, but nothing more.
Bargain and sale deed?
2 is B, the bargain and sale deed. Actions that actually transfer title. When does the transfer of ownership take place? I just gave you guys a little story on it.
Delivery and acceptance?
Upon delivery and acceptance of the deed itself. 8 is C. Clause in a deed that makes the transfer. What's the heart of the deed? The one that explains most of the stuff. It's the clause in the deed that makes the transfer. Explaining what's being sold, what kind of deed we're getting, all that stuff.
Acknowledgement?
An acknowledgement is just a confirmation of something.
Granting clause?
So the clause in the deed that makes the transfer is the granting clause. 10 is D. Legal promise.
Convenient?
A covenant.
Covenant.
Is E, a covenant. That's a legal promise. A document used to transfer title to a parcel of real property. What do we
It's
call
deed?
it? Document is called the deed. 7 is F. It's used to transfer title, rights, or interest, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just used to transfer ownership. It could also be used to transfer one's rights in the property as well, like air rights and mineral rights, etc. So 7 is F. Mean sea level at New York Harbor is also the local zero elevation point. What do we call that? The mean sea level at New York Harbor, also local zero elevation point. It's also referred to as
Benchmark?
the datum.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
6 is G. Deed stating the grantor has not encumbered the property. They just promise that as long as they've owned the property, they've done nothing to encumber it, but don't guarantee for anybody that owned it before them.
Bargain and sale CAG.
The bargain and sale CAG type deed, 3 is H. A declaration to a notary or other official to prevent forgeries.
Acknowledgement.
1 is I, correct. A marker placed by the U.S. Geological Survey stating elevation.
Benchmark.
A benchmark, 4 is J. By the way, the U.S. Geological Survey is a department of government that monitors our planet. So they monitor the sea levels, they monitor seismic activity for earthquakes and volcano activities and the planet from outer space, the weather systems, everything. That's called the USGS, the United States Geological Survey. Sometimes on news, you could see where they show the radar from the satellite imagery. It may say on it USGS. That's a government-owned radar then. They don't have their own satellites. It's a government-owned radar, the United States Geological Survey there. Okay. So, all right, key terms 2. A spot at which the meets and bounds description begins and ends.
Point of beginning.
The POB, the point of beginning, 6 is A. A fixed, natural, or man-made object identifying the boundaries in a meets and bounds description. So this is what you would pay the surveyor to put in the ground at each of the corners of the property.
Monuments.
5 is B, monuments. One who transfers title by signing a deed.
Grantor.
The grantor, 1 is C. Description sufficient to identify a parcel that is acceptable by a court of law.
Legal description.
It's a legal description, 3 is D. To have and to hold clause that explains the ownership that's being transferred when anything needs to be further clarified. That's also stated in this clause that begins with the words to have and to hold.
Habendum clause.
Habendum clause, 2 is E. A deed providing the grantee with the most protection.
Warranty deed.
A warranty deed, 9 is F, also known as a full warranty or full covenant and warranty deed. General warranty deed, yes. 9 is F. System for land description used in Western states.
Rectangular survey system.
The rectangular or government survey system, 8 is G. A deed releasing any interest grantor may have without actually claiming season. What does that mean, without season? Claiming the ownership because you're in possession of it. What's the deed that releases the interest the grantor may have without even claiming that they are the owner?
Quitclaim deed.
Deed.
7 is H, the quitclaim deed, and a description using boundaries and direction.
Meets and bounds.
We use it in the 13 original states, New Jersey being one of them. What was it that you said?
Meets and bounds.
Yes, the meets and bounds system, 4 is I, and that concludes chapter 19.